Merry Christmas, everyone. Today's the 24th of December. Tomorrow is Christmas Day. I thought I would come and just do another little album review before I sign off for a few days. And I'm not really sure what to pick today. I know what we're going to do. We're going to start with the S.L.P. What I've been doing over the last couple of days is talking about different albums of the year. In every year, I've had different albums of the year. Last year, shockingly, I only had one album, which was the Shame album. But over the last few years, there's been a growing number. But I've been doing an album of the year now since I was kind of like, I don't know, 20, 18. So, but this year there's like 10 albums that I've listened to a lot, which I think are excellent and deserve talking about. So, but I thought it would just be worth going over and reflecting on some of the absolutely brilliant albums that have come out this year. And today, we're going to be talking about the S.L.P. The S.L.P. is the debut album from Sergio Pizzorno, the guitarist and second frontman of Kasabian, I would say. Others just may know him simply as Serge, if you're a fan of Kasabian. He released a single back in May called Favourites, which featured Lil Sims, which we'll go into in just a little minute, but this is him just kind of experimenting by himself. Kasabian said they were going off for a break for a year. He decided that he just wanted to make something that was just for him. I believe produced by him as well. So, when did it come out? June time, maybe? 30th of August. So it came out wedding weekend. That is a tiny little dog. Oh my god, that's a tiny little dog. And as an album, I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did. When they first released the singles, it was alright. It was good fun. And then I did a video, when was it? About, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, where I went through kind of singles that had just been released, and I didn't really like the song that I heard either, but I still thought I'd give it a go, and hell, I'm really glad I did, because this album is absolutely deserving of this spot. I mean, Serge is just one of those guys that should never be questioned anyway, but this record in particular is just so brilliant. So, as normal, what we're going to do is we're going to go through record track for track, and we're going to talk about what I like, what I don't like, the majority of this obviously being what I do like. The first track, Meanwhile in Geneva, has this real, wonderful, cinematic spaghetti western theme to it. This thematically reminds me of what we were talking about yesterday with Foles, but this in particular with this little kind of musical interlude is just brilliant. Meanwhile in Geneva, yeah, I mean, this feels like something that Ennio Morricone would have, or Ennio Morricone would have been making when he made spaghetti western tracks for things like The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. It just fits that bill so wonderfully. I can see him coming out to this live. It's brilliant. I think if you're someone who just likes lyrics, this is like just a boring little musical track. But you know what? If you go back and listen to Kasabian's first album, they had lots of stuff like this. Just little musical interludes is a very important part of clearly Serge's thing here, and as he produced it, you know, these musical numbers speak just as much as his lyrics and his songs do. First proper song of the album in terms of songwriting and lyrical content is the song Lockdown, which starts very slow but again has that similar kind of spaghetti western theme, especially in the kind of guitar. I don't know whether he's just played a lot of Red Dead Redemption before making this album, but that certainly feels, this song here, especially with that guitar, feels very, very, very cowboy. But it has this kind of almost bluesy feel. Something that you would imagine someone like Danger Mouse encouraging out of someone. Yeah, this sounds like a Michael Kiwanuka record, especially from the last 2 albums that he's put out. It's great. As a song, it builds, it's quite slow, but it is a builder, and I think that's the important thing when you're having slow records, that I think Kasabian have always done very well as well, I think, is around having that kind of slow piece, but not boring. Otherwise it just becomes ballady and self-indulgent. Don't think that's what this is. Yeah, it's very cool. We then move into the track Trance, in 2 brackets, which we talked about in an episode that in like a little test video I was doing a few months back. When I first heard it, I was so unimpressed by this record. But I tell you what, if you listen to this 3 or 4 times, it is incredible. This song is so addictive. This reminds me way more of something you'd find on like a Gorillaz album, very Damon Albarn in that kind of regard. Lots of loops, kind of rave piano from the 90s, not kind of as repetitive as you'd find in those old like kind of rave records, but certainly you can hear the kind of chords that you would find in tracks like that. And it's called Trance, right, which alludes to like that whole scene. I don't think that's what it's actually about there. I think it's about being caught in a trance, which I think it does a very good job of doing. The lyrics are just very hypnotic, but very catchy. You will wake up with this song stuck in your head and you'll need to listen to it straight away. It builds wonderfully as well. Yeah, just as the record builds, it's just wonderful. It's quite epic. Strings in the background are just absolutely wonderful. This is the one that you'll be singing as you leave the gig. Yeah, love it. I think the chorus is great and it's just a wonderfully produced record. We then move into the track The Woo. Now, I thought this would be kind of inspired by people like Wu-Tang Clan. This doesn't at all. This record has kind of a ska punk influence. Similar to how we were talking yesterday with Foles, there's like an influence of like dub reggae, especially on some of the effects used on some of the drums and the guitar stabs. Really simple little kind of synth melodies, but the drum beat's quite fast. It's kind of almost, yeah, well, I guess it would allude to kind of things like slang tang in that kind of reggaeton. Is it reggaeton? Maybe not reggaeton. I don't know what slang tang is, but that kind of, yeah, Caribbean influence, but kind of ska in the same way that you would expect like something from the Specials or Madness. But then it's got a kind of punk feel that reminds me of people like Jamie T as well, which I think are kind of influenced by that scene as well. So it's a great record, this. It fits wonderfully with the album. Like I was saying yesterday though, with Apple Music and like iTunes adverts, this would definitely be featured on an Apple advert. Next is Soldiers 00018, and this has a kind of quirkier approach to it as a record. It's a very distorted vocal. I don't know, it's gone for like a guitar amp or something. But in that same way as The Woo does, it's got this kind of slang tang style bass. I'll put a little clip of slang tang now just in case anyone doesn't know what that is. Way in my brain, it's way in my... But I wouldn't say it's kind of regular dub influenced. But certainly, going back to what I was saying about Gorillaz, this is definitely fitting very well with it. Whatever, Gorillaz and Kasabian never work together. That should definitely happen. It's just so ska. I love, like, this fits with what he's going for. You've got this kind of trio or triad of influences, which you got kind of influences from things like dub and reggae and Caribbean music, which is such an important thing. It's influenced bloody everything forever. It also has this cinematic theme running throughout the album. Whilst you can tell, obviously, and he said many times before, you just got to look at the way Kasabian have been going over the last few years. They're kind of influenced by rave, whilst also being a band. So it's a really well balanced album, influentially. Its influences are very balanced and very diverse, and I think it's not like there's like a reggae track and then there's a cinematic track and then there's this. It's they all blend very, very well together, and this completely adds to that. We then get to our middle cinematic track here, which kind of breaks the album up into two parts quite nicely, in my opinion. This is Meanwhile at the Welcome, and it actually features a guest vocal from Slow Tie. Now, this must have been recorded before Slow Tie's album came out, and certainly before it blew up to what it is, so Serge clearly has a good taste. Managing to get Slow Tie on his album at this point is a brilliant thing. On the back of this album, I'd love to see him work with some people like Slow Tie in the future on a bigger project. That would be great. Yeah, I just think it's impressive to get Slow Tie on this. And you know, we will be talking about Slow Tie. Spoilers, it's definitely one of the albums of the year. I think that he's so diverse, and to chuck him on a project like this, I mean, now it's obvious, in hindsight it's obvious, right, because Slow Tie doesn't fit the mold of that kind of rapper, but at the time this came out, I remember being quite shocked that he managed to get this, number one, and also shocked that, you know, it's not featuring in the rest of Slow Tie's kind of arsenal. I think, if anything, this track says more about Slow Tie than it does Serge, but it's a wonderful little middle point, and a nice little, hang on a minute, is that Slow Tie? Next we break into the record Nobody Else, which was the second single that was released. Annie Mac hammered this one. This one really pushing the boundaries of what Serge does as a producer. Really kind of reminds me of like Happy Mondays era Manchester, like northern music. I think it's great. Starts off really ballady, and then that piano starts to loop in a more kind of old 90s house fashion, and all of a sudden you've just got like this festival banger. Yeah, I think it's just this is one of those, a little bit like I was saying yesterday with Sunday with Foles. It's one of those records you just want to bounce to and have a dance to. I think this record is so good. This song is so good. There's a real highlight point on the album for me. I really think it's great. And it's one of those little like hooks in the chorus that I find myself just kind of singing while I'm doing my dishes or whatever. Yeah, an absolute highlight on the album for me, this. The next record is Favourites featuring Lil Sims, which we talked about earlier. This was the first single that was released on this project, and very, very different. I mean, this sounds so Kasabian, doesn't it? This song here is so Kasabian. It has that real kind of Stone Roses bass line, but then has this real kind of hip-hop influenced drum break, which I absolutely love. It's got a lot of funk to it, which I think is great, without being like boringly funk based. And you know, Lil Sims is just one of those artists that I think is just incredible. I think she's brilliant. I've yet to watch the new series of Top Boy, and I know she's in it, so we'll definitely need to get on that soon. Yeah, just the production on this record I think is amazing. Next is Kung Fu, which is kind of a little bit of a 1 minute interlude, and feels like it could like feature on a Red Hot Chili Peppers album. Maybe. Like I feel like Anthony Kiedis is about to break out any minute. Not really much to say about that, it's just a little guitar lick. But it's a nice little bit of the album. I think people have forgotten to do skits. I think it's nice when you're having a body of work to have little things that tie records together or kind of calm it down a bit. There's a whole lot to be said about that as an artistic choice. It's very easy to just go hit, 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 hit. This album is such an album. It's an old school album. It's a body of work rather than just a load of singles that go together. It ebbs and flows as it should, and I think more people could take a little bit of a page out of this book. Track 10, The Youngest Gary. Now whether that's inspired by Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age's comments on the Joe Rogan podcast the other day or not, I don't know. I mean, this has this real distorted guitar, but sounding like a synth in that way that LCD Sound System would have done, or Justice, or Digitalism, or Mastercraft, or Soulwax. It has that kind of Daft Punk drum beat to it as well, where it's this old loop, but then kind of has this kind of grungy feel as well. There was a whole scene like this at one point that just sounded great, and this would have fit in with that perfectly. Great little vocal samples in there. Whether that's a different language or it's just gobbledygook that he's kind of tied together or not, I don't know. But it's one of those ones that you want to listen to really loud. I take it back. This is the iPod advert. This one would have been the iPod advert. Perhaps I should cut together loads of the old iPod adverts and just like remake them for this. We'll see. And then we fade into the final track, which is the last of the three kind of cinematic Meanwhile tracks. Meanwhile in the Silent Nowhere. And this track kind of ties together some of those kind of themes of the album. You start with this real slow, bluesy, cowboy-esque song. This one with kind of vocals and him singing. And then halfway through, it just jumps straight in with that really epic arpeggiated synth, which I just think it sounds like something that shouldn't work, but does. And you know at this point, this is designed for nothing else but this album. It's not meant to be something that is there to sell records or as a single by any means. This is Serge expressing himself as creatively as possible and doing it without being too abstract, I think, which is just absolutely wonderful. And just after that kind of synth breaks, you have this epic string section. And, you know, this is the final battle of the cowboy film. It's they're having their shootout, or they're riding off into the sunset, or something bad's just happened, or, you know, it conjures up so many different images of kind of classic films that I've seen over the years. And I think that's where this album is so great, because it's all him. Literally, it's all him singing, songwriting, and production. Like, Serge is one of the greatest musicians in the UK. There is no doubt about that. There is no arguing. The man is an absolute genius. And this record, as a whole, just proves that. The epicness of this final track is just absolutely wonderful. And it's just I'm so happy that I went out of my way to listen to it, even though I didn't dig my claws into like the first two singles. And I love being so wrong about this. It will go down as one of my albums of the year, very, very comfortably. I listened to it a lot on my road trip around Australia, and I can just remember driving through crazy forests and jungles. And personally, that's wonderful, but I've always thought albums should soundtrack your life. But this is meant to kind of mimic a soundtrack to a film. So there's something kind of very romantic about that idea as an album. I think the other thing with this is that this is him showing how good he is. I would love now for, obviously I think Kasabian are getting back together. I would love to see, obviously I'd love to see a new Kasabian record, but I would also absolutely love to see Serge working with some other artists. We can talk about who that will be another time, but I think people like Catfish at the Bottom End would have been a really interesting choice to get them involved with them. I would actually, even though I know that Foles, obviously Yannis is working as the main producer now, I think that would be a really interesting collaboration. I'd also love him to see something like working with people like Slow Tie, or, you know, someone that isn't necessarily the obvious choice for this. Equally, I'd then love to see him work with a producer that's not himself. I'd love to see him write some songs and get someone like Mark Ronson or Danger Mouse, or hell, both. Wouldn't that be amazing? Imagine getting those two to collaborate on an album. I just think that he has now said, not only am I part of potentially one of the best bands in the UK, I'm a great solo artist, and I can contribute so much more to the rest of the music industry. It's an exciting time to be Serge, and a fan of Kasabian and Serge's music. So I'm well happy with this album. If I was going to score these albums, I'd be giving this a 10 out of 10, because I think it's just absolutely brilliant, and I've really enjoyed listening to it as an album. But I'd love to know what you guys think. You know, have you listened to this album before? Are you a fan of Kasabian? You know, I think this has kind of been swept under the rug as one of the big parts of this year. I think it's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. The S.L.P by Serge. Go and check it out if you haven't, and let me know what you think. Right, I guess I should do another album review now while I'm here. Thank you so much to everyone that's been watching these videos all year. You know, it's been such an epic thing to do this year, just to start doing this. It's a whole new skill set, but it's been a lot of fun. I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas, and this will continue now. Hopefully. It will definitely continue until the end of the year, and then hopefully we'll get some music festival news. But until then, have a lovely Christmas, and I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers. Bye.